Hello and welcome to Fueling Around with me, Jason Plato, and the Torval to my Dean, Dave Vitti.
Hello.
Fueling Around is powered by Adrian Flux. As the UK's largest insurance specialist broker, Adrian Flux will tailor a quote to your exact needs and help save you some money on your car, your bike, or even your home insurance. So how are we, Dave?
Very good, thank you, Mr. Plato. You well? You had a good week?
I've had not a bad week. I'd rather it wasn't raining because I've, in that nice warm wet weather we had, I was out nearly every day just making sure the lines on the grass were straight because I'm a bit OCD like that, but it's a bit overgrown. I've got some weeds out there. And obviously the best way to get rid of weeds is just mow them.
Absolutely. And also the weather has an effect because it's not as nice drinking gin and tonics in your office as in the garden, is it? I think that we should get on to our surprise guest for today.
We should. And our guest today, well, he's a pretty special dude, actually. And it's probably the first Sir either of us have spoken till since we were probably in short trousers, I reckon.
I think so, yeah, definitely. The first Sir I can remember in decades.
Yeah, and we're not even going to get into trouble, and we're going to have a right old giggle, aren't we? So this Sir just happens to be Great Britain's greatest ever Olympian, with a record haul of 6 gold medals. He's also a pretty tasty racing driver, so to be fair to say he's rapid on a number of wheels, it's the one and only Sir Chris Hoy. Hello, mate, how are you?
Hello, I'm very well. Thank you for having me on the show.
Hey, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on board.
Sporting a rather sharp beard, I see it.
Yeah, I've trimmed it actually. It was getting a little bit groundskeeper willy. There's a little bit of ginger in there. It's getting a bit bushy. So I did a bit of filming yesterday online, and my sort of co-presenter Jill Douglas, she couldn't stop laughing, and she had to sort of do about 3 or 4 retakes before we could get it going properly. So I thought, you know what, I should probably trim this because I've got to go out in public soon.
So she was laughing at the beard?
She was laughing at the beard. She hadn't seen the beard. It was just a bit, I don't know. It's the first time I've ever grown any facial hair. I didn't even know if I could, so I was quite impressed that I managed to put together a proper beard. You know, it's part of being a bloke now, isn't it? Part of being a grown-up man. You can grow facial hair.
Well, it's funny you should say that, actually, because I, at the age of 37, I'm still trying to grow a beard, and all I get is just that little bit under there, under my chin, and I don't get anything on the sides, and I'm still waiting for the point where I go through puberty properly and can actually grow some facial hair.
Isn't it called a soul patch, or is that a bit further up, the little patch under your chin?
I don't know what it's called. I think it's just called, frankly, it's called embarrassing is what it's called. Chris, how's lockdown been treating you? Because I would imagine that you're not the best at being cooped up and doing nothing for weeks and months on end.
Yeah, it's what I've been asking for so long. You know, the last few years have been absolutely crazy. I've been so busy, and there's times where you just need a bit of time to calm down and take stock and, you know, just catch your breath. But it's probably a bit too much. The first couple of weeks I was quite grateful to have a bit of downtime. But yeah, you're right. It's after a while you just feel a bit cooped up, don't you? But yeah, we're very lucky, as you're saying, with the weather. It's been great weather and getting outside, fresh air, been on the bike, cycling a fair bit. But I have missed the driving. You know, had a busy year ahead with lots of racing and lots of fun driving planned, and yeah, that's all been scuppered.
Well, do you know what? This is one of the cool things. You know, you check you out on Wiki. So Chris Hoy, the first thing it says is a British racing driver, blah blah blah, and he wasn't bad at cycling. Isn't that amazing?
Is that what it says?
Well, that's the first thing it says. He's a British racing driver and a former track cyclist, and then it goes on. But isn't that amazing how all that epic stuff you did in the past has now been overcome by your track antics?
Well, it's really satisfying, obviously, looking back on a career and looking back at, you know, the great memories you have and the high points and all the experiences you've had. But also, I think it's important to have things to look forward to and things to strive for, no matter what stage in your life you're in. So motor racing has become it was a passion for me. It was never something I ever thought I could get into. I didn't even know how to get into it. The only way I got into it was actually through filming a documentary about my hero, Colin McRae. So in 2013, there was a documentary BBC did about 3, you know, legends of racing: Stirling Moss, Jackie Stewart and Colin McRae, and they asked me to present the Colin McRae episode. So through the filming of that, I bumped into Roger Green, who was working with Radical Cars at that time, and he said, we've got this novice race series starting next year. If you want to join us, then we'd love to have you. And it it literally just that one day at Alton Park on a random track day, I got this opportunity to start racing. So I grabbed it with both hands.
So where were you in your track cycling career? At what stage did the motor racing thing become just something you were really interested in? I mean, were you midway? Was it the beginning or the end? Or
I'd always been interested in motorsport, but I think it was 2008. I got an invite to come to Bedford and did a Palmer Sport Day with Jaguar, and I'd never been on track before, and I absolutely loved it. Loved it. And I spoke to Jonathan Palmer afterwards and said, "What do I need to do to get back on track? What would you advise to do this more regularly?" And he said, "Well, I would buy a small, lightweight car that's going to be cheap to run. It's not going to lose much value. It's not going to wear the tyres and the brakes." He said, "You should probably get a Caterham." So, that was the first thing I went for. I bought a Caterham. He said, "Don't get anything like an R300. You don't need that much power." So I bought an R400, of course. But it's always, you always think you need more power. Of course I didn't. I had way more power than I had skill. But I went to Alton Park on an absolutely torrential rain day. It was horrendous weather. One of the worst tracks in the world to go and have your first track day in an overpowered lightweight car. But I absolutely loved it. And I used to do maybe 4 or 5 track days a year at the end of each cycling season, and never thought it would go any further than that. And it was, as I say, it was just that opportunity, filming Colin McRae, that I got to start racing.
So therefore there was a period then of about 4 or 5 years. Would you say that, as someone who needs a focus, does the motorsport kind of replace the focus that you had through the training and the cycling and your career that way, that you had to throw yourself into something else?
Yeah, it wasn't as though it was a direct replacement or that I was seeking something to replace the cycling. In many ways, I was glad to put the cycling to bed, if you like, finish your career and all the pressure and all the constant battling against injury and everything that went with it. I mean, I loved it. It was my dream to be a cyclist all my life. It was amazing. But equally, with all that comes pressure. So I wasn't looking for something as intense as that, but I was looking for something that, because you can't drive on a car on a track every day of the week, or I certainly don't get that chance. So it'd be, once every couple of weeks I'd be on the track. But when I was in the car and when I was competing or testing or whatever, it was 100% focus. And I loved the fact you could immerse yourself in it, and everything else that was happening in your life in the world at that time was shut out. You were focused on one thing and one thing only.
Do you know what? For people that haven't ever found that experience, and a lot do in lots of different, I mean, even golf, you get that focus, but there is nothing, like Chris says, there's nothing like it, is there? The moment the green flag starts at the beginning of a race until the very end, you are in this weird separate world where nothing, even pain, and you will appreciate this, Chris, because of the cycling, even pain just doesn't register in the system. Nothing does, other than what you got to do.
I'd never thought about that before, because I suppose it's so involving in terms of all of your senses that you haven't got any capacity to be daydreaming or thinking about anything else or anything else on your mind, because literally your whole body, physically and mentally, is completely absorbed in what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, you look at, say, doing Le Mans as an example, doing endurance motor racing, and the word endurance is maybe a little bit misleading because it's like a sprint but for 24 hours in terms of every single braking point, every single apex, every single throttle application, every single input you put into the car has to be precise. It's not like you're sort of going along at 70% effort. It's 100% for 24 hours. Whereas most endurance sports, you're trying to distract yourself from what you're doing because of the low level pain. Whereas in motorsport, the focus has to be on what you're doing. It has to be task driven. And I love the intensity of it. I absolutely, I love that intensity. I love the speed. I love the adrenaline. I love the fact it's a team effort as well, that everyone's working so hard for it. I love the fact that there's so many variables and unknown, factors to what you're doing, that in the old days, you were sort of 95% of the end result. Whereas in motorsport, as a driver, it doesn't matter who you are, you could be, Fernando Alonso, Michael Schumacher, whoever, Jason Plato, or, you could be some idiot like me in a car. It's, you have to have the right car, the right package, the right team, and you need a bit of luck on your side as well.
Absolutely, it's all those things. And in fact, what you said there, that's the reason why I stick to 4 45-minute sprint races. 24 hours on the limit.
Gee
Lordy, I'll be too thirsty.
I was watching your the 2016 documentary, obviously with the build up to Le Mans, and they obviously had you going out driving at night. And I thought, that must feel completely different. I mean, not just a little bit different. Same track, obviously, but if you've been going around that track however many times in the daytime, and then suddenly it's completely dark and you're on your headlights, it must be a very odd feeling. And I would imagine also it must feel quite lonely, doesn't it, or not?
For me, it's one of the great parts of endurance racing. And Le Mans, it's like a romantic part of the 24-hour races. When the sun sets, the lights come on, and that first time when you pull out the pits and you head out and you go down the Mulsanne in the dark, it's a really evocative kind of image in my head of just thinking about that is Le Mans to me. And it doesn't take as long as you think, or it didn't take me. I think if you've got good eyesight, you're okay. I think a lot of the guys who struggle with their eyesight, it's a big issue. And I was concerned about it. And the first time I ever drove in the dark was actually at Paul Ricard with the guys at Ginetta in an LMP3 car.
Yeah.
And the car had just been finished. Literally only maybe a couple of weeks or even less than 2 weeks before the test, they got it finished. And we headed out, and Mike Simpson, Charlie Robertson, Lawrence Tomlinson, and they said, well, Chris, want you to get as much time behind the wheel as possible in the dark, so we'll send you out first in the dark. It's like, great, sounds fantastic. Headed out there, out the pit lane, and Paul Ricard, obviously, middle of nowhere, there's not much ambient light there anyway, and there's not much stuff that's close to the track, so you don't have many visual reference points apart from all these painted stripes on the track. And I went round in the first lap, I couldn't see anything. And it was terrifying, and all I could see was the headlights of the cars behind that were catching me up, and I had this awful. I was on the radio saying, "I can't see a thing. This is awful." And I remember just thinking, if this is what it's like, there's no way I can race in this environment. The dream is over. There's no way I'm going to get to Le Mans if this is as bad as it's going to be. I can barely get around a test lap, let alone a race. So pulled straight in the pits, and they're saying, "Look, it doesn't matter. It takes time to adapt, and you'll be fine. We'll go back out again. Just go and have a break, have a coffee, and we'll do it later on." So Mike Simpson, the pro driver, jumped in the car, one lap, out he went, in lap, straight back in. Yeah, the lights aren't working. So yeah. So the lights weren't working. They put them on. Oh, that's fine. Yeah, I can see them. So
because even in the daylight, that bloody Paul Ricard, I hate that place. With all the coloured lines everywhere.
Yeah,
and it's just awful, isn't it? It's distracting.
For me, it's a track of two halves, because the first half is amazing. I think it's got so much character and flowing, and it's great. And then once you get past the sort of fast right-hander scene at the end of the long straight, that last half of the track, you get a lot. You can't find where the apex is. You can't. I mean, for me as an amateur driver, it's incredible. I mean, maybe that's why they designed it, to make it testing and make it difficult. But it's not a fun track. The first half is fun. The second half is just frustrating.
Yeah. I concur.
Have you ever driven in the dark, Jason? I mean, professionally, I don't mean going to the pub and back.
I don't drive to the pub. That would be ridiculous, because then I'd have to get a taxi to get my car in the morning. It's much easier to get one of my mates to pick me up. We used to do a few ton car races at night. Did some night race, some specials. And, like Chris, I loved it. But I did find it just a little bit easier to get into a groove, because the lights light up what you want to see. What you don't really want to see, you just don't see. However, the distraction of headlights behind, that's tricky to deal with. And I can imagine at Le Mans, where there's cars with huge speed differences, that's a particularly difficult thing. But I loved it. I loved it at night. I thought it was great.
Can I ask a potentially stupid question, having never obviously done any night racing? Is that when you're doing something like Le Mans or any night racing, are the headlights dipped? Or have you got people's glare right in your mirror?
It's the biggest, most glariest lights you could possibly imagine, and they flash them to try and let you see that they're coming. So you've got three different classes, or more than three different classes, but essentially three different types of car: the GT cars, the LMP2s, and the LMP1s. And the LMP1s, there's only maybe 6 of them, but because they're going so fast, it feels like there's maybe 20, because they're lapping you and lapping you and lapping you. And the biggest risk for me certainly was getting used to. Like, when an LMP1 comes up behind you, you don't look in your mirrors at it and go, "Oh, there's an LMP1 car," because you get dazzled by looking in the lights, in the mirrors, right? So you look straight forward, and it lights up the whole road in front of you. And the lights are unbelievable. But then, so you see this one, it's coming. It's Mark Webber in the Porsche, and he goes past, and you think, phew, and then you're about to go back on the racing line, and there's 2 of them, and you've thought there's just one, and there's only 2, or maybe there's 2, there's 3, and you think there's only 2. So you've got to be so careful that there isn't another one behind the one that's just past you. really potentially really dangerous. So the big issue in Le Mans is always, or in any endurance racing, is the different speeds, the different differentials in speed. So you do have to be incredibly careful, and you just don't want to be the one person that causes a stupid accident and ruins it for everybody.
Chris, let's go back to the beginning then. So obviously cars have been a passion of yours since you were a little boy. What are your earliest car memories? Can you remember like the cars of your parents and whatnot?
Yeah, he had lots of transit vans and various things for work. He had his own sort of building business, or it's just basically himself working as a builder. But he bought a BMW 2002 from his one of his friends, this sort of cream one. And I still have a soft spot for them now. I saw one recently at an auction, and I was like, I would love to buy one for him, just for him to have and to sort of to own.
My dad had one as well. My dad had a white one.
Oh, really?
And actually, there's a picture of me somewhere, aged about 5 or 6, sat on the bonnet.
Oh, they're great cars. I love them.
They're very rare now, and I saw one recently, and I just thought that's beautiful. And given the opportunity and the pockets, I'd love to have another one.
Yeah, likewise. My old man was a dealer, BMW dealer, and occasionally it happened maybe once or twice. He brought a 2002 Turbo home, which was just the most ridiculous thing ever.
Wow.
Put your foot down, nothing happened, wait half a minute. But great things, but worth a few bob now, I think, aren't they?
Yeah, they would be. That's probably why I didn't want to buy it, actually, but too expensive. But I remember, like, 911s were a big part of the early 80s, certainly when I was a kid. Growing up, I got a Skeletric set, it was a Le Mans edition Skeletric set with the two 911s, a gold and a silver one, and it had headlights on it. And I just used to be, I don't know why I was so aware of 911s at that time. I guess they were an iconic, well, they still are an iconic car now, but back in the 80s, the old air-cooled 911s were awesome. So yeah, they were the kind of things that I was interested in. And I guess like all kids, you play with toy cars, you're aware of cars, it's a big part of your life, but yeah, never ever thought it'd go beyond that. And yeah, I was always a fan of motorsport. Used to watch the Formula One, the BTCC, and all the racing in my earlier years. And then rally became a big passion. Watching Colin McRae in the 90s. But yeah, always been a fan.
So, what was the first car which emptied a bit of cash out of the Hoy bank account? Then the first one that you bought?
Well, I guess looking back now, it kind of explains it really. It was a BMW. It was a 318. I must have been like 21 at the time or 22. And I've been using essentially a family car. It was a Citroen Xantia. It had about 200,000 miles in the clock by this point. The suspension kept going. It would go up and down. You'd be on the motorway, and all of a sudden the suspension would just drop, and then you just have to crank it up, and it would go up really high and down. And it was a death trap. So eventually, when I had enough money I didn't actually have enough money, but I'd sort of saved money up to buy a car. And my dad said, "Look, I'm going away for the weekend. When I come back, I'll go with you, and we'll go around the car dealers, and we'll get you a nice, sensible car, and blah blah blah." And I was like, yeah, great. And I went into there was a BMW dealership near my parents' house, went straight in. The first day my dad had gone away. And I sort of looked around and I saw a BMW 318, and it was the cheapest one in the whole showroom. But it was within the realms of possibility that I could afford it on hire purchase. And the guy basically saw me come in and well, you can add this and put that on and do this, give you a finance deal. And I was paying for it for about the next 6 years or something, still paying it off. But I absolutely loved it, and I was terrified it was going to get stolen or scratched. I lived in a flat, so I had it parked out on the main street down in Leith in Edinburgh. And I used to go up and down to Manchester to train, so I'd be up and down the M6 and the M74 almost every week in it. And it was a fantastic car. Absolutely loved it. So
what followed then, the BMW in the car history? How do you replace that? Because that's quite a tasty first purchase.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't new. It was a second-hand one. It had sort of 30-odd thousand miles in the clock. 4 or 5 years old when I got it. It was an R-Reg, I think.
Colour?
But black.
Oh, you fighter.
A bit of a theme for black. I had black cars for quite a while, actually. So the next one, it was a TDI Golf. It's one of the first ever sort of performance diesel hatchbacks back in early 2000s. It was a 150 horsepower, but it had the thing that everybody talked about was the torque it had. It's got more torque than a Porsche Boxster, and it does 40 miles to the gallon or whatever. I was like, oh, I have one of them. But it was sensible. I could put the back seats down, take the bikes. It was quicker than the BMW by a long shot. But it was the Mark IV Golf, was it? Or Mark IV Golf. So it was the kind of the unloved child. It's a bit understeery and a little bit podgy, and just the Mark V was a big step up from there. So it was. I mean, I loved it. It was great, and that was my next one on from the BMW.
And then I wonder what comes next, Dave. What do you reckon? Do you reckon it's still on the German theme, or do you think he's gone back to the Citroen, romantic Citroen days, perhaps?
See, I think that we might now be going to something a little bit more exotic and something a little bit more dangerous and wild. But that's just a guess. I don't know.
Well, it was a bit longer before that came along. It was I got a deal with Audi, so they had this. They offered like a discount to sports people, and by that point I'd started. I think I got a medal in Sydney. I got a silver medal in the Olympics, and I was able to sort of write letters and say, "Please, can I have sponsorship?" And so I got a little bit of money off and bought an Audi. I got an A4, but it was early days of performance diesel, if you like. You know, that kind of window when it started to become popular. Yeah. And I got a 3-litre A4. And I got the Valcona leather, and I got, you know, the RS wheels on it, and it looked absolutely, it was brand new, my first ever brand new car, and it was absolutely amazing. I loved it. Manual box and everything else, loads of power, loads of torque, and you know, I just thought this was the quickest, most powerful, most exciting car I'd ever driven. Ironically, looking back now, you know, it's probably a proper retmobile in terms of, you know, but it was great, 4-wheel drive, sensible, and then one of my friends he'd bought a brand new 911.
Here we go.
And we went out for driving it, and I sat in the passenger seat, and I just remember being equally blown away and excited about what an amazing car it was, and at the same time completely deflated because it just made my diesel A4 seem so utterly bland and numb and everything else. And that really opened my eyes. That was the first performance car I'd ever sat in and experienced what, you know, a sort of a fun car could be like. So it was one of these things that I dreamt of, getting something more exotic. It was an M3, an E46 M3 was the big car at that time, an attainable goal, something that it was a beautiful car, the straight six engine, everything about it, the sound, the performance, it was awesome. And that was my dream car, attainable dream car at that time. So I saved up my pennies, and I think it was 2007 or 2008. No, 2007 I got one, second hand, 8,000 miles on the clock. It was carbon black with the Imola red interior. It was an absolute, 18-inch wheels, not the 19s, so it had better ride. It was, the dream car at that time. So that was my first performance car this was my dream car, and I was thinking, well, I'm a lucky boy.
That's a proper roundabout drift car, that is. I used to have one of those.
So basically I went from, playing the PlayStation, watching videos of folk drifting and stuff, thinking, right, okay, you get in the car. It was a Sunday afternoon, quiet dual carriageway with a roundabout coming off it. I thought, and it was a bit wet, traction control off. I'll just give it a bit of a boot, and the back end just snapped. Oh, yeah. And I was a full panic mode, sort of armfuls of opposite lock, and then lifted off. Snap. So it snapped back the other way. I went all the way from the one side of the right. It was an empty. There was no other cars around, thankfully, but almost clipping the outside curb, to then almost clipping the inside curb, to then almost clipping the outside curb again, sort of 3 times trying to catch it. Eventually got it under control, pulled over, got a lay-by, pulled over, stopped, turned off the engine, and just took a massive deep breath, and I was like, traction control, back on. Stay out of trouble. And you just think, God, these, you have to go through these processes to actually, because people can say to you, don't do this or do that. You've got to learn from your own mistakes, and just you just thank your lucky stars that the mistakes come at times when nothing else could have gone wrong, or you couldn't have hurt yourself or someone else.
Do you know what I've always said? I've always been a big advocate that if you get like a saucy car, or in fact any car, but if you get a saucy car, you should just go find a car park, an empty car park, and just have a bit of a play. Not to be a nuisance to anyone, but just to understand what this thing can do. Because, like you say, like the M3s, when they bite, Christ, do they bite? And I've done it. I've completely run out of talent where I've not been really concentrating, and I've been somewhere else and given it a big bootful on a wet road, and it's sheer luck you don't go in the fence, isn't it?
We have this theory, don't we, Jason, that everybody should live with an M3 for a little while. Doesn't matter how long, it might only be a couple of weeks, but everybody should live with one for a little bit, because for sure you'll learn stuff, as we've just proven. Possibly through accidents and hedges and skid marks, but you should definitely have one.
In the winter.
Oh, they're great cars. Great cars. I do miss it. The only reason I got rid of it was because I got sponsored by Jaguar, so they gave me a choice of any of their cars. So I chose an XKR. On a sort of every 6 months they give you a new one, just a constant sort of loan. And it was amazing to have this beautiful V8 supercharged, monster. And I only had one parking space in the flats that I lived in. So I had to sell the M3, and I guess it was one of these things. I thought, well, fair enough. I've got a lovely Jaguar to drive. That's great. So I sold it to my teammate, another teammate, and he used to you come out of training. He'd been in the track all day. It's at 5 o'clock at night. He's been sitting there outside in the middle of winter. He'd fire it up, and he would just boot it out the car park on a cold engine. And you're that's my little baby. What are you doing? He just ragged it all the time, ruined the car. And it was just this horrible feeling of watching your pride and joy getting destroyed by somebody else. But yeah, that's life.
The XKR is some car though as well. I love them. I think they're beautiful. I've always lusted after one of those. And actually, I was watching a car program not long ago, and it was sort of all about affordable classics. Because actually, relatively speaking, they're not stupid money now, are they?
It's a huge amount of car for the money. They're a lovely place to be, sitting there behind the wheel. Incredibly comfortable, but they can still put a smile on your face.
See, this is interesting because they've never done anything for me at all.
Really?
No, never. I don't know why. Any Jag's never done anything for me at all. Isn't it weird?
What, not even the F-Type?
No, they just don't rock my boat.
That's funny because I'd never say that I'm a Jag man or anything per se, but there's certain ones, and that was the one that I remember really caught my eye, and just sort of looking at it, just thinking that would be a beautiful long-distance grand tourer. Do you know what I mean? Going away on the continent for a week or so in one of those, just beautiful.
Look at the affection in his body language. Now, I can see it. You love that car, don't you?
I can imagine myself in Provence or somewhere, or the south of France, Côte d'Azur in one of these.
Cream leather interior.
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
Hearing aid beige, I prefer to call it.
So where did the GTR come into the mix?
The GTR came after that. So Jaguar, they had this Academy of Sport and gave me a car, and I got to go and do lots of fun events driving on the track, and that's when I went to Bedford for the first time and experienced track driving for the first time. So it was great. I was working with Jaguar, and then Nissan came along in 2013 or the end of 2012, and they said, look, we're looking to sponsor the Olympics in Rio. We would like someone to be an ambassador for that relationship. And to be honest, I was really happy with Jag. They were nice people and a good relationship. And so I sort of think, well, I don't really want to change. And I'm happy with, sticking with who I'm with just now. So I sort of said stupidly, I thought, well, nothing to risk here, nothing to lose. Let's just see if they can do some racing, or, well, okay, then if I come to represent Nissan, could you get me in a race car? Could I have a bit of, track experience or do this or that? And they said, well, we'll get you down to Silverstone and we'll have a look at you. And they got me out in a GT4 350Z. I did a few laps, came in, set a time. And it was Darren Cox and the guys at GT Academy, and they said, well, we think we can get you to Le Mans. And I was like, what do you mean? As a spectator? I said, no, we can get you there. We could get you there in 3 years' time. This is what we do. We take people from the PlayStation who have never, driven on a track before in their lives, and we can, with intense coaching and training, we can fast track that process. And we think we can get you to a level where you'd be able to be competent on the track and get you to Le Mans. So it was this amazing opportunity. A part of me was a bit scared by it, thinking, God, this is a huge step up. I was racing novice level in SR1s with Radical to the next year GT3 in British GT, which was a huge wake up call. The year after that, the European Le Mans Series, and then the year after that was Le Mans itself. So GTRs, basically through Nissan, I got to, the other stipulation was, can I get some racing and can I have a GTR, please? And they're like, well, we don't give a GTR to anyone. I said, well, that's it. And they came back and said, okay, well, we'll get you a GTR. So that was where I got, every 6 months they would give you a GTR on loan and replace it every 6 months.
That's a mad box of tricks, isn't it?
What a car. And it's, my perceptions of what it was going to be like were very different to the reality. I thought it was just going to be this kind of car that drives itself and it has the image of being a PlayStation car, but so much character. When you get to drive one on a track where there's space and there is actual opportunity to go beyond the limit, you realise that it does have more to it than just this point and shoot kind of thing. But like anybody, the first thing you do once you've got it, you go and find a quiet place and you do a launch. And now 2.8 seconds, not to 60, doesn't sound that ridiculous. There's so many cars. You've got the Tesla, you've got all these other cars that can do amazing things. But back then, in the sort of 2012, whenever it was I first drove it, that first time when I launched off the line, and it knocks the wind out of your chest. It's absolutely incredible.
So here's a question for you. If out of all the cars of the history of Hoy, you've got to pick one car, and it's the car which you're going to live with for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Tricky. If it was for everything, then it's got to be an estate car. I'm a big fan of estate cars. I've had a few sort of fast estates over the years: RS4, RS6, E63, C63. I think the RS6 probably. It's not the most entertaining in terms of, it's not the kind of thing you would take on the track and throw around. But in terms of what it can do and the capability it has in all conditions, I've got winter tyres for when the weather's bad, and it'll handle everything. And it's I think it's stylish. It's fun in a straight line. Certainly, it can put a smile on your face just by putting your foot down. And it carries everything: the family, the bikes, the lot. Yeah. So yeah, I think RS6 would probably be the one.
Great choice.
There's not many cars where you can take your family and you can take the dog and whatever and do 180 miles per hour.
Yeah, on the way to nursery and stuff, yeah.
So Chris, what's next for you in terms of racing this year? I know that obviously your sort of schedule has been decimated with everything, but when do you next see yourself back on track?
Well, who knows, really. It's nothing has been finalised yet. There's a couple of exciting things which are yet to be confirmed, which if they do go ahead would be amazing. But like all these things, I never really get too excited until it actually happens, until you're getting strapped into the car and you think, yeah, this is definitely going ahead. But
hey, can I tell a little story?
Yeah,
of course.
It was one of the first times, in fact, I think it was the first time I met Sir Chris, was at the Race of Champions. And it's not the story you think I'm going to tell, because I wouldn't tell that story. That's a great story, not one for me to tell. But it was the PR day we were at Wembley, weren't we?
Yeah, that's right.
It was the PR day, and there's a great event, like an invite for lots of drivers around the world, and it's always done on like an inside of an arena, like at Wembley Stadium, and then it went to the Olympic Stadium a few years later. And it was, I don't know, say the Wednesday before, and we were doing a little bit of PR, and I was called down there to do some stuff, and this pop star Ella Eyre was there, and Chris Hoy. And I can remember walking into the little PR room with a backdrop, and Chris was sat on a little podium chair. Ella Eyre was next to him, and I came in and sat next to him, and I can remember him standing up, and he's in his Lycra, and I remember looking at him thinking, your leg's bigger than my torso, that's not right. But I couldn't speak. I couldn't speak. And do you know what, I'd never seen like an Olympic athlete on your discipline. How did they grow that big? I mean, they were mental.
It's not actually from the cycling, it's from the weightlifting. So you train to be stronger. So if you cycle every day for the rest of your life, you'll never get legs that are massive. So you look at Geraint Thomas or Chris Froome or Bradley Wiggins, they have skinny legs, much skinnier than your average person, because they have to be efficient and have to cycle for hours and hours at a time, week after week. But for what we do, it's almost
power.
Like...
Yes,
it's like a drag racing car versus, a Le Mans car. It's about explosive power. It's about being able to get it down. So you don't train to create bigger legs, but the legs get bigger as a byproduct of the strength training that you do in the gym. So squatting heavy, eating lots of protein, and repeating that week after week, year after year, it is incredible what the human body can do. If you narrow your focus down to doing one thing and one thing really, really well, and you just, you devote your life to it, it's whether it's music or motor racing or lifting a lump of metal up and down or riding a bike in anti-clockwise circles, doesn't matter what you do. If you focus, if you have the desire and the drive, it is amazing what the human race can do and what they can become.
I've just thought of a great question. Why are the velodromes all anti-clockwise?
Well, they're not all anti-clockwise. The ones in the southern hemisphere go the other way around.
Is he pulling a chain?
No way. Is that no, that's not true. That's not true.
Almost got him.
I'm not having it. Right, let's get out of here, Jason.
So, as was said, that's about it for this episode of Fueling Around, powered by Adrian Flux. As the UK's largest specialist insurance broker, Adrian Flux will tailor a quote to your exact needs and help you save your money on your car, your bike, or indeed your home insurance. So, again, as always, Dave, thank you. But also a huge thanks to our special guest this week, the one and only Sir Chris Hoy. Thanks, pal.
Thank you very much.
And if you've liked what you've heard, then give us the 5-star rating, press the subscribe button, and share the podcast on all your socials. That's it for this time. We'll see you soon.